Picture this. You're the lord or lady of a real medieval castle. One of those rugged fortresses on a windswept cliff. You've got your velvet robe on, a heavy goblet of wine in your hand, and you're heading off for a majestic night's sleep. And right there, the second the candles go out, the fairy tale shatters, and the harsh, cold laws of physics take over.
I mean, come on, who hasn't? It's the ultimate romantic fantasy, right? But before you get too carried away with that dream, we need to talk about the reality. Because here's the thing. For any king or queen sleeping in the winter, the main enemy wasn't some invading army. No, it was the castle itself. All right, let's dive into why that is. You have to remember, castles were designed for one thing: to destroy enemy armies. They were not designed for comfort. And the number one reason they were so incredibly cold comes down to a physics concept called thermal inertia. It really all boils down to this. You know those massive 2 or 3 meter 6 stone walls? The ones that are so pleasantly cool in the summer? Well, in the winter, they do the exact opposite. They become these colossal generators of cold, literally sucking the warmth right out of the air. You could burn an entire forest in the fireplace, and the stone would always win. And this quote? Wow, it just perfectly captures the human cost of all that physics. This wasn't some abstract problem. It was a miserable, tooth-chattering reality for the people inside. And you know what the architects supposedly said back? Something like, well, the walls can withstand a direct hit from a trebuchet. Small comfort when you're catching pneumonia. And the design flaws didn't stop at the walls, oh no. Windows were basically just holes with wooden shutters. Those grand high ceilings, they just meant all your precious heat drifted up to the heavens, leaving you shivering down on the floor. And the fireplaces? Don't even get me started. They were total engineering failures. They only heated what was directly in front of them, so you'd have this bizarre feeling of your face roasting while your back was freezing. And all the while, they were sucking in more icy air from outside just to feed the flames. So, faced with this pretty much impossible situation, different cultures came up with some really unique strategies. Let's head over to England first, where the cold was that damp, clingy kind. Their solution? To build a defensive fortress inside the bedroom. Get this, the Tudor bed wasn't just furniture. It was practically architecture, a house within a house. Before bed, servants would pull these heavy wool or velvet curtains all the way around, literally sealing the monarch inside. Sure, the air got stuffy, but it was warm. And, to get it ready, a servant would use something called a warming pan, basically a brass container on a stick filled with red-hot coals to heat up the sheets. One wrong move, and the whole woolen feather fortress could go up in flames. Now, let's hop across the channel to France. They looked at the exact same problem and came up with a completely opposite solution. Their thinking was, if you can't heat the room itself, maybe you can heat the atmosphere with people. And this is where it gets really interesting. It's a total contrast in philosophies. While the English king was shivering away in splendid isolation inside his fabric fort, the French king embraced the crowd. I mean, sleeping in the same room or even the same bed as a friend or a courtier was a sign of huge trust and, more importantly, a shared fight against freezing to death. You have to imagine the French royal bedroom was just chaos. It was a command center, a social club, and a dorm room all rolled into one. You'd have advisors, scribes, servants, the king's favorites, justers, even dogs, all crammed in there. And they weren't just for company, they were living insulation. The combined body heat and breath of dozens of people would actually raise the room's temperature, and all that warm air would rise up to the king's high bed. In effect, the servants were a living furnace for their monarch. Okay, so we've got fabric forts in England and human furnaces in France, but over in Central and Eastern Europe, something totally different was happening. A technological revolution. They decided to solve the problem not with textiles or people, but with engineering.
And what an incredible leap forward this was. On one side, you've got the old, primitive fireplace. On the other, the German Kachelofen, or tile stove. This thing wasn't just a fire. It was a heat battery. You'd stoke it once a day, usually from a hallway, to keep the mess out. Inside, a maze of channels would heat up this massive core of brick and ceramic, which would then just radiate a soft, even warmth for the next 24 hours. It heated the whole room with no drafts. This was an absolute game changer. For the first time ever, a royal could actually walk around their bedroom in just a shirt in the dead of winter. French visitors wrote about it in their journals, totally shocked by this strange, dry, warm world where you didn't have to see your own breath indoors. And if you think the German stove was impressive, wait till you hear what the Russians did. They took that concept and basically supersized it. The Russian stove, the pech, was this monumental structure, the true heart of the home. It could turn a room into a tropical oasis while it was minus 30 degrees outside. Foreign ambassadors wrote home in total disbelief, describing how the Russians were drinking cold beverages in overheated rooms while they themselves were sweating buckets in their fur coats. So, after this whole tour of shivering, stuffy, and sometimes surprisingly cozy royal bedrooms, what's the takeaway? What does all this history of discomfort mean for us today? Well, when you see it laid out on a timeline like this, you really get a sense of the long, slow march towards something we just completely take for granted. From those drafty castles to fabric cocoons to those massive ceramic stoves, the fight for a warm night's sleep was a centuries-long war of innovation. It really wasn't until the Industrial Revolution that we could finally tame the cold on a massive scale, leading to the humble but totally revolutionary invention of central heating. And that really brings us to the main point. When it comes to basic comfort, we live better than any King Henry or King Louis ever did. The greatest luxury, the one thing they could never achieve, wasn't more gold or bigger armies. It was effortless, consistent, boring warmth. The simple, almost godlike power to just turn a dial and change the climate of your own little kingdom. So the next time you're home and you think it's a little chilly, take a second and look at your radiator. After learning about centuries of monarchs shivering, huddling, and innovating just to survive the night, it's pretty hard not to see that boring old metal box as the ultimate symbol of royal comfort, a triumph they could only dream of. Something to think about, right?